The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the dusty general store in Johnson City, Texas, and Clara Zimmerman pressed her gloved hands against her stomach, willing herself not to be sick as the July heat of 1878 pressed down like a wool blanket. She had been traveling for 3 weeks, each mile taking her further from Philadelphia and the life that had nearly destroyed her. The long sleeves of her black cotton dress clung to her arms despite the oppressive temperature, and she tugged at the cuffs anxiously as the driver opened the door. "Johnson City, miss," he said gruffly, offering his weathered hand to help her down. Clara accepted his assistance, her legs unsteady after hours cramped in the coach. The town stretched before her in shades of brown and gold, wooden buildings lining a wide main street that seemed to shimmer in the afternoon sun. Cattle lowed somewhere in the distance, and the air smelled of dust, horses, and something cooking that made her empty stomach clench with hunger. She had come here with a single letter of introduction to a Mrs. Henderson, who supposedly needed help at her boarding house. It was honest work, Clara told herself, retrieving her small carpet bag from the driver. Honest work in a place where no one knew her name or her shame. "You all right there, miss?" The driver peered at her with concern. "You look peaked." "Just the heat," Clara managed, though in truth, the heat was the least of her worries. She fumbled in her reticule for coins to tip him, her fingers trembling slightly. "Henderson's boarding house is 2 blocks down on the left," he said, pocketing the coins. "Can't miss it. Big white building with green shutters." Clara thanked him and began walking, very aware of the curious glances from townspeople going about their business. A woman alone was always a subject of interest, and she kept her head down, focusing on putting one foot in front of the other. The weight of her past pressed against her shoulders as heavily as the Texas sun. Mrs. Henderson turned out to be a stout woman in her 50s with sharp eyes, and a no-nonsense manner that reminded Clara of the matron at the foundling home where she'd briefly volunteered before everything fell apart. The woman looked her up and down, taking in the proper dress, the careful posture, the quality of her well-worn boots. "You're the girl from Philadelphia," Mrs. Henderson said, not unkindly. "Got your letter 3 weeks back. Said you could cook and clean and needed a fresh start." "Yes, madam." Clara's voice came out steadier than she felt. "I'm a hard worker. I won't cause trouble." Something in Mrs. Henderson's expression softened. "Honey, every woman who comes this far west is running from something. Long as you do your work and keep your nose clean, I don't care what you left behind." She gestured toward the stairs. "Rooms on the 3rd floor, last door on the right. You share with Molly, she works in the kitchen. Supper's at 6. You can start tomorrow morning." The room was small but clean, with 2 narrow beds and a window that looked out over the main street. Clara set down her bag and sank onto the bed, finally allowing herself to breathe. She had made it. She was here, in this strange hot place where the sky stretched endlessly and the air tasted different. No one here knew about Marcus. No one knew about the locked room or the belt or the nights when she'd prayed for death to come quickly. She pushed the thoughts away and began unpacking, her movements mechanical. When she came to the simple cotton nightgown at the bottom of her bag, she paused, running her fingers over the fabric. She would need to wait until her roommate was asleep before changing. The scars couldn't be hidden in a nightgown. Molly turned out to be a cheerful girl of 19 with red hair and freckles who talked constantly and seemed genuinely delighted to have a roommate. Over supper in the boarding house's dining room, she peppered Clara with questions about Philadelphia and city life while Clara picked at her beef stew and tried to answer without revealing too much. "It must be so exciting, living in a big city," Molly sighed. "All those fancy stores and theaters and people everywhere." "It has its drawbacks," Clara said carefully. She had learned the art of deflection over the past year, how to turn conversations away from dangerous territory. Tell me about Johnson City. How long have you lived here? Molly was happy to oblige, chattering about the town's founding 20 years earlier, the cattle drives that came through twice a year, and the various characters who populated the area. She pointed out other diners as they ate, providing running commentary. That's Mr. Dalton. He runs the bank. That's the widow Morrison. She's sweet, but talks your ear off. And that's Isaac Owens, though everyone calls him Doc on account of him being the town doctor and all. Clara followed Molly's gaze to a man sitting alone near the window. He was perhaps 30, with dark hair that needed cutting and a lean, weathered face that suggested he spent considerable time outdoors. He wore simple clothes, a blue shirt and dark trousers, and seemed absorbed in the book propped against his water glass. "He's the doctor?" Clara asked, surprised. She had expected someone older. "Best one for 100 miles, Molly said proudly, as if she had personally trained him. "Fixed my brother's leg after a horse trampled it, and Tommy walks good as new now. Doc's been here 5 years, came from somewhere back east originally. Virginia, I think. He's real smart and real kind, though he keeps to himself mostly." Clara watched as the man turned a page, his long fingers careful with the worn book. There was something gentle in the gesture that struck her, a contrast to the hard-bitten cowboys and rough miners she had seen on the street. "Why'd he come west if he was a doctor back east?" she asked, then immediately wished she hadn't. It was the sort of question that invited reciprocation, but Molly just shrugged. "Same reason most folks come west, I reckon, looking for something or running from something, sometimes both." She pushed back from the table. "Come on, I'll show you where we keep the linens. Mrs. Henderson likes the rooms changed every Monday without fail." The next weeks passed in a blur of hard work that Clara welcomed. She scrubbed floors and changed linens and helped in the kitchen, falling into bed each night too exhausted for nightmares. The routine was soothing in its predictability, and Mrs. Henderson proved to be a fair employer who appreciated thoroughness and didn't pry into her past. Clara kept to herself as much as possible, speaking politely when spoken to but volunteering nothing. She attended church on Sundays because Mrs. Henderson expected it, sitting in the back and leaving quickly afterward. She wore her long sleeves despite the heat, even when Molly and the other girls switched to lighter cotton with shorter sleeves and complained about the temperature. "Aren't you roasting in that?" Molly asked one particularly sweltering afternoon as they stripped beds on the second floor. "I burn easily," Clara said, which was true enough, though it wasn't the real reason. "Fair skin." She had been in Johnson City for 3 weeks when she first spoke to Isaac Owens beyond a polite greeting. It happened on a Thursday afternoon when Mrs. Henderson sent her to the general store for supplies. Clara was carefully checking items off her list when a commotion erupted outside. "Someone get the doctor. Billy's been kicked by a horse." Clara rushed out with several other shoppers to find a young boy, perhaps 8 years old, lying in the street clutching his ribs. His face was white with pain, and Clara's nursing instincts, dormant since leaving Philadelphia, roared to life. She dropped to her knees beside him without thinking. "Don't move, sweetheart," she said gently, her hands hovering over him as she assessed the damage. "Where does it hurt?" "My side," the boy gasped. "Can't breathe right, I know. Try to take shallow breaths. Help is coming." She looked up at the gathered crowd. "Someone bring water and clean cloth." "I'm here." The voice was calm and assured, and then Isaac Owens was kneeling beside her, medical bag in hand. His gray eyes flicked to her briefly, taking in her position and competent manner. "You know medicine, some nursing," Clara admitted. "I think his ribs are broken." "Agreed." Isaac's hands moved over the boy with practiced efficiency, gentle but thorough. "Billy, I need to check your belly. This might hurt a bit." The boy whimpered but held still as Isaac palpated his abdomen. Clara found herself watching his technique, noting the care he took, the way he talked to his young patient in a steady, reassuring tone. "No internal bleeding that I can feel," Isaac said finally. "But those ribs need wrapping, and you need to rest for at least 2 weeks, young man. No more trying to ride horses that are too big for you." "Yes, sir," Billy whispered. "Help me get him to my office," Isaac said, looking at Clara. "You've got steady hands. I could use an extra pair." Clara hesitated for only a moment before nodding. Together, they carefully lifted Billy and carried him down the street to a small building with a sign reading Dr. Owens, physician and surgeon. Inside, the office was neat and organized, smelling of carbolic acid and dried herbs. Isaac directed her to set Billy on the examination table, then moved to gather supplies. "Wash your hands in that basin there," he told Clara. "Soap's on the counter." She obeyed, scrubbing thoroughly while Isaac explained to Billy what he was going to do. The boy's mother arrived moments later, out of breath and terrified, and Isaac took time to calm her as well before beginning his work. "Hold his hand," Isaac told Clara. "Keep him still." For the next 20 minutes, Clara assisted as Isaac cleaned the scrapes on Billy's side, checked again for internal injuries, and carefully wrapped his broken ribs. She anticipated his needs without being asked, handing him bandages and instruments, keeping Billy calm with soft words when the pain made him cry. When it was finished, and Billy's mother had taken him home with strict instructions about rest and care, Isaac turned to Clara with an appraising look. "You weren't lying about knowing nursing," he said. "Where did you train?" "Philadelphia," Clara said, wiping down the examination table with disinfectant. "I was never a formal nurse, just helped at a hospital for a while." "You're good at it." He began cleaning his instruments, his movements methodical. Natural instincts. You kept the boy calm and anticipated every step. That's rare. Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks at the praise. "Thank you. If you ever want work, I could use help here 2 or 3 days a week. Pays not much, but it's steady." He glanced at her. "Only if you're interested. No pressure." The offer surprised her. She had been doing her best to remain invisible, and yet here was an opportunity to do work she actually found meaningful. But working closely with the doctor meant more interaction, more chances for questions she didn't want to answer. "I work at the boarding house," she said hesitantly. "I know. I asked Mrs. Henderson before offering. She says you're a hard worker, but she could spare you a few afternoons a week if you wanted." Isaac set down the instrument he had been cleaning and looked at her directly. "Look, Miss Zimmerman, I'm not trying to pry into your business. I just need competent help, and you clearly have the skills." "Think about it." Clara found herself nodding. "All right, I'll think about it." She said yes 2 days later, partly because Mrs. Henderson encouraged it, partly because the extra money would help her save for true independence, but mostly because some part of her missed the feeling of being useful, of having skills that mattered. Isaac seemed pleased but not effusive, simply nodding and telling her to come by Tuesday afternoon. Working with Isaac proved easier than Clara had feared. He was a man of few words, focused entirely on his patients when they came, but not unkind. He explained things as they worked, teaching her about setting bones and treating fever, and the particular challenges of practicing medicine on the frontier where supplies were limited and help far away. "Back in Virginia, I had a whole hospital at my disposal," he said one afternoon as they prepared tinctures. "Here, you learn to make do: whiskey for disinfectant when the carbolic runs out, willow bark for fever, spider webs to stop bleeding in a pinch. Why did you leave Virginia?" The question was out before Clara could stop it, and she immediately regretted her forwardness. But Isaac just continued measuring out dried herbs. The war. Lost my taste for Virginia after that. Came west looking for a place where the ghosts couldn't follow. He glanced at her. Didn't work entirely, but it's better than staying was. Clara understood that sentiment more than he knew. They worked in comfortable silence after that, and she found herself relaxing incrementally in his presence. Isaac never pushed, never pried, simply accepted her as she was. It was on a warm September afternoon, nearly 3 months after Clara's arrival, that everything changed. They had been treating a rancher with an infected leg wound, and the work had been messy and difficult. Afterward, while washing up, Clara had rolled her sleeves back without thinking, too focused on scrubbing the blood from her hands to remember. Dear God. Isaac's voice was quiet but shocked, and Clara looked up to find him staring at her exposed forearms. The scars were clearly visible, dozens of them, some old and silvered, others newer and still pink. They crossed her skin in a terrible map of pain, some thin and precise, others thick and ragged. Clara's blood turned to ice. She yanked her sleeves down frantically, her heart hammering. I should go. Wait. Isaac's hand caught her wrist, not hard but firm enough to stop her flight. His face had gone pale. Who did that to you? No one. I mean, it's not. Clara couldn't get the words out, couldn't breathe. The room was spinning. Sit down before you faint. Isaac guided her to a chair, his touch gentle now. He crouched in front of her, those gray eyes searching her face. Breathe slowly, in and out. That's it. Clara focused on his voice, on the steady rhythm he was setting, until the panic receded enough that she could think. Shame washed over her in waves. He knew now, he had seen. I'm sorry, she whispered. I should have been more careful. You're apologizing. Isaac's voice held an edge she hadn't heard before. Clara, those scars, someone hurt you, badly and repeatedly. When she didn't answer, couldn't answer, he continued in a softer tone. Is that why you came west? To get away from whoever did that? She nodded, unable to speak around the tightness in her throat. Isaac was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was fierce with an emotion she couldn't quite name. You're safe now. 3 words. Simple words. But they hit Clara with the force of a physical blow, and suddenly she was crying, great gasping sobs that shook her whole body. Isaac didn't try to touch her, just stayed crouched in front of her, a solid presence while she fell apart. When the storm finally passed, Clara felt hollowed out but somehow lighter. She wiped her eyes with shaking hands. I'm sorry. I don't usually stop apologizing, Isaac said firmly. He stood and got her a glass of water, waiting while she drank. You don't have to tell me anything you don't want to, but I need you to hear this. Whatever happened to you, wherever you came from, you're safe here. No one is going to hurt you like that again. Not while I'm breathing. The conviction in his voice made something in Clara's chest crack open. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not pity but anger on her behalf, fierce protectiveness for someone who was still practically a stranger. His name was Marcus, she heard herself say. Marcus Wellington. We were married 3 years ago. I was 18, and he was handsome and charming, and I thought myself so lucky. The words came slowly at first, then faster, like poison draining from a wound. He waited until after the wedding to show his true nature. He said wives needed discipline. That I was too willful, too independent. The scars were his way of teaching me obedience. Isaac's jaw tightened, but he remained silent, letting her speak. I tried to leave twice. The first time he found me within a day, the second time was worse. He locked me in our bedroom for 2 weeks, and the punishments, Clara's voice broke. I stopped trying after that, just survived day by day. Then 6 months ago he was killed in a factory accident. His family blamed me, said God was punishing him for marrying beneath his station. They wanted nothing to do with me, which was fine because I wanted nothing from them. I took what little money I had saved in secret and came west, to Johnson City, to anywhere he had never been, anywhere I could breathe. Clara met Isaac's eyes. I know I'm damaged goods. I know no decent man would want stop. Isaac's voice was sharp enough to cut through her self-recrimination. Don't you dare say that. Don't let that bastard's poison define you. He pulled up another chair and sat facing her. You survived. You got free. That doesn't make you damaged. That makes you strong. Clara wanted to believe him, but 3 years of Marcus's voice in her head made it difficult. The scars won't ever go away. Scars mean you survived something that tried to kill you, Isaac said quietly. I know something about that. He hesitated, then rolled up his own right sleeve, revealing a jagged scar that ran from wrist to elbow. Shrapnel from a cannon blast during the war. Nearly lost the arm. The surgeon said I was lucky. His laugh was bitter. I watched 40 men die that day, and I was lucky because I only got scarred. Clara stared at the scar, then back at his face. You still became a doctor. The scars don't define what we can become. They're just proof we survived long enough to have a future. Isaac rolled his sleeve back down. Your past is yours, Clara. You don't have to share it with anyone, but don't let shame make you hide. Not here. Something shifted between them in that moment, an understanding that went deeper than words. They were both survivors, both scarred, both trying to build new lives from the wreckage of their pasts. Thank you, Clara said softly, for not looking at me differently. How could I? Isaac's smile was sad. We're the same, you and I, just trying to outrun our ghosts. After that day, their friendship deepened into something more profound. Clara found herself looking forward to the afternoons at the medical office, not just for the work but for Isaac's steady presence. They talked as they worked, sharing stories carefully at first, then with increasing openness. Isaac told her about the war, about the field hospital where he had worked amid the screaming wounded, about the weight of making impossible choices about who to save when supplies ran short. He spoke of the nightmares that had plagued him for years after, the way loud noises still made him flinch. Clara told him about her childhood in Philadelphia, about her mother who had died when she was 12, and her father who had followed 2 years later, leaving her alone. She spoke of the loneliness that had made Marcus's attention feel like salvation, how she had ignored every warning sign because she so desperately wanted to be loved. You deserve to be loved, Isaac said fiercely when she finished. You still do. Real love, the kind that doesn't hurt. Do you believe in that? Clara asked. After everything we've both seen. Isaac was quiet for a long moment, checking the stitches on a patient's wound. I want to, he finally said. I think I'm starting to. The meaning behind his words hung in the air between them, delicate and terrifying and full of possibility. October arrived with cooler temperatures that Clara welcomed after the brutal summer heat. The town was busy with preparations for the fall cattle drive, and Isaac's practice saw a steady stream of cowboys needing treatment for various injuries before hitting the trail. Clara had been in Johnson City for 5 months now, and for the first time since fleeing Philadelphia, she could imagine a future beyond simple survival. She had saved enough money to consider renting a small room of her own. She had skills that were valued. And she had Isaac, whose friendship had become the anchor of her days. She was very carefully not thinking about the way her heart lifted when she saw him, or how his rare smiles made warmth spread through her chest. That way lay danger, the risk of trusting again. She had told herself she would never put herself in a position to be hurt like that again, but Isaac was nothing like Marcus. The comparison was laughable. Where Marcus had been volatile and controlling, Isaac was steady and respectful. Where Marcus had demanded obedience, Isaac valued her opinions. Where Marcus had used his strength to hurt, Isaac used his to heal. "You're thinking too loud," Molly observed one evening as they prepared for bed. "I can practically hear the wheels turning in your head." Clara managed a small smile. "Just tired." "Uh-huh." Molly braided her red hair, watching Clara in the small mirror. "This wouldn't have anything to do with a certain handsome doctor, would it?" "I don't know what you mean." "Clara, honey, everyone in town can see the way you two look at each other. Well, everyone except apparently you two." Molly turned to face her. "He's a good man, one of the best. If you're interested, you could do a lot worse." "I'm not looking for a husband," Clara said quickly. Too quickly. Molly's expression softened. "I don't know what happened to you before you came here, and I won't pry. But I've seen you with Doc Owens. You smile more. You seem lighter. That's worth something, isn't it?" Clara thought about that conversation as she drifted off to sleep. Worth something. Was it possible that she could have something worth having, that the future could hold more than just surviving? The question followed her through the next days, especially as she became increasingly aware of Isaac's presence. The way his hand would steady her when they worked on a difficult patient. The way he remembered that she preferred tea to coffee and always had a cup waiting when she arrived. The way he looked at her sometimes, when he thought she wasn't paying attention, with an expression that made her chest tight. It came to a head on a Tuesday evening in late October. They had just finished treating a minor with a crushed hand, saving the appendage through careful surgery that had taken hours. Afterward, as they cleaned up, Isaac was unusually quiet. "You did good work today," Clara offered, washing instruments. "That man will keep his hand because of you." "Because of us," Isaac corrected. "I couldn't have done it without your assistance." He dried his hands slowly, not meeting her eyes. "Clara, I need to say something, and I want you to know you can tell me to shut up and it won't change our working relationship or friendship." Clara's heart began to race. "All right, I care about you." The words came out in a rush. "More than I probably should, more than I intended to. You're smart and capable and brave, and every time I see you, I want to make sure you know how remarkable you are." He finally looked at her. "I know you've been hurt. I know you might not ever want that kind of relationship again, but I had to tell you. You deserve to know that you're cared for." For a moment, Clara couldn't breathe. Terror and hope warred in her chest. Years of conditioning telling her to run, to protect herself, to never be vulnerable again. But then she looked at Isaac's face, at the open honesty there, the way he was giving her complete control of the situation, and something inside her shifted. "I care about you too," she whispered, "but I'm afraid. Of me, of being hurt again, of making the same mistakes, of trusting wrong." The confession cost her, but it felt important to be honest. Isaac nodded slowly. "I understand. And I would never pressure you or push you into anything you're not ready for. Your friendship alone is more than I hoped for when I came to this town." He smiled sadly. "But if you ever decide you want more, if you ever feel safe enough to try, I'll be here. I'll wait as long as it takes." The sincerity in his voice broke something open in Clara. She stepped forward, closing the distance between them, and took his hand. It was the first time she had initiated physical contact with him, and she felt him go very still. "I'm not sure I know how to do this," she said quietly. "How to be close to someone without fear. Marcus broke something in me." "He didn't break you," Isaac said firmly. His hand squeezed hers gently. "He hurt you, but you're not broken, and we can take this as slow as you need. No expectations, no pressure, just us figuring it out together." "Together," Clara repeated, testing the word. It felt foreign but not unpleasant. "I'd like that." Isaac's smile transformed his face, and Clara felt answering warmth bloom in her chest. They stood there in the quiet office, hands linked, and for the first time in years, Clara allowed herself to hope. They courted slowly, carefully, with Isaac following Clara's lead at every step. He never showed up unannounced, always asked permission before taking her arm or holding her hand. They took walks through town on Sunday afternoons, attended church socials together, shared quiet dinners at the boarding house. Isaac was endlessly patient with her fears. When she flinched at sudden movements, he moved more slowly. When she grew anxious about being alone with him, he suggested they meet in public places. When she woke from nightmares about Marcus and was withdrawn the next day, he simply stayed close and gave her space to recover. "You're healing," he told her one afternoon as they sat by the creek outside town, watching the water flow past. "It's not linear. There will be good days and bad days, but you're getting stronger." Clara leaned against his shoulder, a gesture that would have been impossible 2 months earlier. "How did you recover? After the war, time, work, purpose?" Isaac's arm came around her carefully. "And accepting that I would never be the same person I was before. The war changed me permanently, but that doesn't mean I can't still have a good life, just a different one than I imagined." "I keep waiting for you to lose patience with me," Clara admitted. "Marcus would have by now, would have demanded more faster. I'm not Marcus." Isaac's voice was gentle but firm, "and I'll keep reminding you of that as often as you need to hear it." November brought the first real cold snap, and with it, a crisis that tested them both. A family of settlers passing through town fell ill with fever, and Isaac worked around the clock trying to save them. Clara assisted, brewing teas and changing compresses and helping him monitor vitals. They lost the father on the 3rd day despite their best efforts. Isaac took it hard, retreating into himself in a way Clara hadn't seen before. She found him that evening in his office, staring at nothing. "You did everything you could," she said softly. "It wasn't enough." His voice was hollow. "It's never enough." Clara recognized that spiral, the way guilt and grief could consume you. She sat beside him and took his hand. "You're human, Isaac. You can't save everyone. Doesn't make it hurt less." He looked at her, and she saw the weight of every patient he had ever lost in his eyes. "Some days I wonder if I'm doing any good at all." "You saved me," Clara said quietly. "Maybe not medically, but you saved me all the same. You showed me I could trust again, that I could hope again. That has to count for something." Isaac's expression cracked, and he pulled her close, burying his face in her shoulder. Clara held him while he grieved, offering the same steady presence he had given her so many times. They stayed like that until the office grew dark, taking comfort in each other's warmth. That night marked a shift in their relationship. They had both been vulnerable now, both been seen at their worst and not rejected. The trust between them deepened into something unshakable. December arrived with surprising gentleness, the weather cool but not bitter. The town prepared for Christmas, and Clara found herself caught up in the festivities despite her usual reserve. Mrs. Henderson organized a party at the boarding house, and Clara helped cook for days beforehand. "You should bring the doctor," Mrs. Henderson said while they rolled out pie crusts. "Everyone knows you're courting. Might as well make it official." Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Is it that obvious? Honey, the man looks at you like you hung the moon, and you light up when he walks in a room. It's downright romantic." Mrs. Henderson patted her hand. "Good for you, finding happiness. Lord knows you deserve it." Isaac came to the party and was immediately absorbed into conversations about medical matters and town business. Clara watched him from across the room, marveling at how comfortable he seemed despite his usual reserve. When he caught her eye, his smile was warm and private just for her. Later, as the party wound down, they stepped outside for fresh air. The night was clear and cold, stars brilliant overhead. Isaac took off his coat and draped it around Clara's shoulders. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his pocket. "Early Christmas present." He handed her a small wrapped package. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet, the kind meant to be worn on the wrist. Clara stared at it, her throat tight. "I thought," Isaac said carefully, "that maybe it was time for something beautiful to cover those scars, not to hide them, but to honor your strength." He took the bracelet and gently fastened it around her left wrist, over the sleeve of her dress. "You survived, Clara. That's worth celebrating." Clara looked at the bracelet gleaming in the moonlight, then at Isaac's hopeful face and felt tears sting her eyes. "It's beautiful, thank you. There's one more thing." Isaac took a deep breath. "I love you. I've probably loved you since that first day when you knelt in the street to help Billy without a second thought. You're brave and kind and stronger than you know, and I would be honored if you would consider being my wife." The world seemed to stop. Clara stared at him, her heart pounding. Part of her wanted to run to protect herself from the risk. But the larger part, the part that had been growing stronger over these months, wanted to say yes, wanted to choose hope over fear. "I love you too," she whispered. "But Isaac, marriage, I don't know if I can. We'll do it your way," Isaac said quickly. "Whatever you need to feel safe. If you want a long engagement, we'll wait. If you want to keep working, I'll support that. If you need separate rooms at first, that's fine. I just want to build a life with you, whatever that looks like." Clara thought about the man before her, the patience he had shown, the respect, the steadfast support. She thought about the future they could have together, full of shared work and quiet evenings and the slow building of trust into something even stronger. "Yes," she said, and watched joy transform his face. "Yes, I'll marry you." Isaac pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was precious, and Clara allowed herself to be held, to feel safe, to believe in tomorrow. They married in January of 1879 in a small ceremony at the church, with Mrs. Henderson and Molly standing as witnesses. Clara wore a simple blue dress with long sleeves and the silver bracelet Isaac had given her. Isaac wore his best suit and couldn't stop smiling. True to his word, Isaac let Clara set the pace for their marriage. They moved into a small house near his medical office, and Isaac showed her the second bedroom he had already prepared in case she needed her own space. Clara was touched by the gesture, but found she felt safe enough to share a room, though they took intimacy slowly, with Isaac constantly checking to make sure she was comfortable. The first time Clara woke from a nightmare, thrashing and terrified, Isaac was there immediately, talking her through it without trying to restrain her. The first time she flinched from his raised hand when he reached for something, he carefully showed her his movements before continuing. He learned her triggers and patterns, and she learned to trust that he would never use them against her. Spring brought new challenges as Clara discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with joy and terror in equal measure. She confided her fears to Isaac one evening as they sat on their porch watching the sunset. "What if I'm a terrible mother? What if I'm too damaged to raise a child properly?" Isaac took her hand. "You're going to be a wonderful mother. You're patient and kind and strong, and you won't be alone. We'll figure it out together. What if I pass my fears on to the baby? Then we'll help them through it, just like we help each other." Isaac pressed a kiss to her temple. "Fear is normal, Clara, but don't let it steal your joy." The pregnancy was difficult, and Clara struggled with sickness and anxiety. But Isaac was there through all of it, holding her hair when she was sick, rubbing her swollen feet, reassuring her when panic struck. Mrs. Henderson and Molly rallied around her as well, providing advice and support. In October of 1879, Clara gave birth to a healthy boy with a strong cry and his father's gray eyes. They named him Samuel, after Clara's father, and as she held her son for the first time, Clara felt a fierce protectiveness surge through her. "I won't let anyone hurt you," she whispered. "You'll grow up knowing you're loved and safe." Isaac stood beside the bed, one hand on her shoulder, looking down at their son with wonder. "We're a family now." The words settled into Clara's heart, filling spaces she hadn't known were empty. They were a family. She had a home. She was safe and loved and building a future she had never dared to dream possible. The years that followed were not without challenges. Clara still had difficult days when the past pressed close. Isaac still struggled with his memories of the war. But they faced everything together, their bond strengthening with each obstacle overcome. Samuel grew into a curious, energetic toddler who kept them both busy. Clara reduced her hours at the medical office, but still assisted with difficult cases. She also began teaching other women basic nursing skills, finding purpose in passing on her knowledge. In 1881, Clara gave birth to a daughter they named Margaret. The labor was easier this time, and Clara felt more confident as a mother. She watched Isaac with their children and marveled at his gentleness, the way he never raised his voice in anger, the way he encouraged their curiosity. "You're thinking again," Isaac said one evening as they watched Samuel and Margaret play on the floor. "I can see it on your face." Clara smiled. "I was thinking about how different my life could have been, how close I came to staying trapped in that darkness. But you didn't stay, you fought your way free." Isaac pulled her close. "That took tremendous courage. I couldn't have done it alone. You saved me." "We saved each other," Isaac corrected gently. "I was just surviving before you came. You gave me a reason to truly live again." On their 5th wedding anniversary in 1884, Isaac surprised Clara with a trip to San Antonio. They left the children with Mrs. Henderson, who had become something of a grandmother figure, and spent 3 days exploring the city. It was the first time Clara had traveled since fleeing Philadelphia, and she found she could enjoy it now without the weight of fear. "I'd like to do this more," she told Isaac as they walked along the river. "See new places with you, make new memories that have nothing to do with the past." "Then we will," Isaac promised. "We'll fill our lives with so much light that the shadows have no choice but to retreat." By 1886, Johnson City had grown considerably, and Isaac's medical practice with it. He trained 2 young doctors to assist him, and Clara found herself managing much of the administrative side while still helping with complex cases. Samuel started school, showing an aptitude for reading that delighted both his parents. Margaret, at 5, was already declaring she wanted to be a doctor like her father. Clara had not worn long sleeves in years. The scars were still visible on her arms, silvered with age, but they no longer filled her with shame. They were part of her story, proof of what she had survived. When people asked about them, she answered honestly, and more than one woman came to her afterward to confide their own stories of abuse. "You're helping people in ways you never expected," Isaac observed one evening after Clara had spent an hour counseling a young wife whose husband had been growing violent. "I wish I could have helped myself sooner," Clara admitted. "Could have saved myself years of pain." "You helped yourself when you could, that's all any of us can do." Isaac squeezed her hand. "And look at what you've built from those ashes, a family, a purpose, a life worth living." Clara looked around their home at the children's toys scattered on the floor, at the medical texts mixed with novels on the shelves, at the life they had created together. "I never thought I could be this happy." "Neither did I," Isaac said, "but here we are." In 1888, their 3rd child was born, another boy they named James. Samuel was 9 now, Margaret 7, and both were thrilled to have a baby brother. Clara marveled at how easily this pregnancy and birth had gone compared to her first, how confident she felt as a mother now. The town celebrated the birth with the affection they showed all of Isaac's family. In the decades since Clara's arrival, she had become a respected member of the community, known for her nursing skills and quiet kindness. Isaac's practice was the best equipped for hundreds of miles, and people traveled great distances to see him. "We've built something good here," Isaac said one night as they stood on their porch, watching stars wheel overhead. "Something lasting." Clara leaned against him, comfortable in his embrace in a way that had taken years to achieve. "Thank you for being patient with me, for waiting while I learned to trust again." "Thank you for trusting me," Isaac replied, "for taking that leap of faith. You gave me everything I didn't know I was missing." As the years continued to pass, Clara watched her children grow with pride. Samuel developed his father's analytical mind and gentle nature. Margaret inherited her mother's determination and her father's fascination with medicine. James was still young but showed signs of being the most outgoing of the three. Clara taught all her children about resilience and kindness, about helping others and standing up for what was right. She never hid her scars from them, using them as teaching moments about survival and strength. "Mama, why do you have those marks?" Margaret asked when she was 8, tracing the silvered lines on Clara's arm. Clara chose her words carefully. "I was hurt by someone who should have protected me before I came here, but I survived and I got away and I found your father in this life. The scars remind me that I'm stronger than I knew." "Did the bad man get punished?" Samuel wanted to know, his young face serious. "He died," Clara said simply. "But even if he hadn't, I would have survived, because survival itself is a kind of victory." Isaac backed her up in these conversations, helping the children understand difficult concepts in age-appropriate ways. Together, they created an environment where feelings could be discussed, where fear could be acknowledged without shame, where love meant safety. In 1892, 13 years after her arrival in Johnson City, Clara stood in the medical office helping Isaac prepare for a lecture he was giving to the new doctors. She was 33 now, her once dark hair showing threads of silver, her face bearing the lines of a life fully lived. "Remember when I could barely assist you without shaking," she said, organizing notes. "Now look at us, training others." Isaac looked up from his papers and smiled, the expression still capable of warming her through. "I knew from that first day you had it in you. You just needed time to believe it yourself. You gave me that time and so much more." Clara crossed to him and took his hands. "I want you to know that I don't just love you, I'm grateful for you every single day. You showed me what real love looks like." Isaac pulled her close. "The feeling is entirely mutual. You made my life worth living again, gave me a family and a purpose beyond just existing." They stood there in the quiet office where they had worked side by side for so many years, holding each other. Outside, Johnson City bustled with life. Inside their home a few blocks away, 3 children were likely arguing over something inconsequential. The future stretched before them full of possibility. "No regrets?" Isaac asked softly. Clara thought about the question, about the long road from Philadelphia and the pain that had brought her west, about the fear she had carried and the courage it had taken to choose hope. "No regrets," she said firmly. "Not a single one." The years that followed continued to bring both challenges and joys, as life always does. There were sick patients they couldn't save, difficult births, accidents and tragedies that reminded them how fragile existence could be. But through it all, Clara and Isaac faced everything together, their partnership deepening into something unshakable. Samuel grew into a thoughtful young man who decided to study law, wanting to help people in a different way than his parents did. Margaret proved as determined as ever and began assisting her father in the medical office by age 15, already showing remarkable aptitude. James developed a love of horses and ranching, spending his free time learning the cattle trade from neighboring ranchers. Clara continued her work helping women who found themselves in situations similar to her own, providing not just medical care, but also emotional support and practical assistance. She helped more than one woman escape an abusive situation, providing funds and connections to start fresh elsewhere. Isaac supported her in this completely, often treating injuries without recording the cause to protect the women involved. "You're doing important work," he told her after she had helped a young woman get on a stage to California. "Saving lives just as surely as I do with my medicine." In 1895, when Clara was 36 and Isaac 47, they took their first real vacation since their anniversary trip to San Antonio. With the children old enough to manage for a few weeks with Mrs. Henderson's supervision, they traveled to Colorado to see the mountains. Standing at the top of Pikes Peak, looking out over endless ranges of snow-capped mountains, Clara felt a profound sense of peace. She thought about the scared woman who had stepped off the stagecoach in Johnson City 17 years earlier, wearing long sleeves in July heat and carrying nothing but shame and fear. "I wouldn't have believed this was possible," she said, gesturing at the view at Isaac beside her at the life they had built. "That someone like me could be this happy." "Someone like you," Isaac repeated, shaking his head. "Clara, you've always been remarkable. You just needed time to see it yourself." That night, in a small hotel in Colorado Springs, Clara lay beside Isaac and thought about everything that had brought her to this moment. The pain was part of her story, but it wasn't the whole story. She had survived and escaped and built something beautiful from the rubble of her past. "I love you," she said into the darkness. Isaac's arm tightened around her. "I love you too, more than words can express. Show me tomorrow and the day after and all the days after that." "I will," Isaac promised, "for the rest of our lives." When they returned to Johnson City, it was to find Margaret had successfully handled 2 difficult medical cases in their absence, with Samuel's help in keeping records. James had won a junior roping competition at a local ranch. The house was chaotic and full of life, and Clara had never been happier to come home. The turn of the century found the Owens family firmly established as pillars of the Johnson City community. Samuel had gone to Austin to study law but wrote frequently. Margaret at 19 was essentially a full doctor already, though she planned to formalize her training soon. James at 12 was already being courted by local ranchers who recognized his talent with horses and cattle. Isaac was now 52, his hair more silver than dark, moving a bit more slowly but still sharp and dedicated. Clara was 41, confident in ways she had never imagined possible in her youth. They had built a life full of purpose and love, raising children who knew they were cherished and who carried that security into their own pursuits. One evening in early 1900, Clara and Isaac sat on their porch as they had countless times before, watching the sunset paint the Texas sky in shades of orange and gold. Margaret was inside studying, James was at a neighboring ranch helping with calving, and Samuel was due home for a visit next month. 21 years, Clara said softly, since I stepped off that stagecoach. Best thing that ever happened to this town, Isaac said with a smile. Certainly the best thing that ever happened to me. Clara reached for his hand, her fingers finding his with the ease of long practice. The silver bracelet he had given her all those years ago still circled her wrist, a reminder of the moment she had chosen hope over fear. I was thinking about writing down my story, she said. Not for publication, but for Margaret and the boys. So they understand where they come from, what it took to build this life. so they know that survival is possible even when everything seems dark. Isaac squeezed her hand. I think that's a wonderful idea. Your story deserves to be told. So Clara began writing, spending quiet evenings filling pages with memories both painful and beautiful. She wrote about Philadelphia and Marcus, about the fear and pain and final desperate escape. She wrote about the stagecoach journey west and her arrival in Johnson City, about those first terrifying months when every shadow seemed to hide a threat. She wrote extensively about Isaac, about his patience and kindness, about the day he had seen her scars and offered safety instead of judgment. She wrote about learning to trust again, about building love slowly and carefully from mutual respect and understanding. She wrote about their children and the life they had created together. My scars used to be marks of shame, she wrote in one entry. Now they are simply part of my history, proof that I survived something that tried to destroy me. I do not hide them anymore. When people ask about them, I tell the truth, not for pity, but to offer hope to others who might be living in their own private hells. Escape is possible. Healing is possible. Joy is possible even after profound pain. The manuscript grew over months, and when she finally showed it to Isaac, he read it with tears in his eyes. You've captured it perfectly, he said. The darkness and the light, the pain and the healing. This will mean so much to our children, and to anyone else who reads it. In 1902, Samuel returned to Johnson City after completing his law studies, setting up a small practice in town. He had inherited his parents' commitment to helping others, and focused much of his work on family law, helping people navigate divorces and custody issues. He had seen how his mother's past had shaped her, and he wanted to help others escape bad situations legally and safely. Margaret officially joined Isaac's medical practice after completing formal training in Dallas, becoming one of the few female doctors in Texas. Together, father and daughter expanded the practice, with Margaret particularly interested in women's health and working with cases of domestic violence and abuse. James, now 14, had decided he wanted to run his own ranch someday. He worked summers and weekends for various local ranchers, learning everything he could. Isaac and Clara supported his dreams fully, proud of his dedication and work ethic. Look at them, Clara said one Sunday as they watched all three children arguing good-naturedly over dinner. We raised good people. We did, Isaac agreed. Kind, confident people who know they are loved. That's the best legacy we could leave. As Clara entered her mid-40s, she found herself reflecting more on the journey that had brought her here. She had lived longer now in Johnson City than she had in Philadelphia. Texas was home in a way Pennsylvania had never been. The scars on her arms had faded to pale silver, barely noticeable unless you knew to look for them. She still had difficult days when old memories surfaced, still occasionally woke from nightmares about Marcus. But they were fewer now, and Isaac was always there to help ground her. Their love had proven itself over more than 2 decades, weathering every storm. In 1904, Samuel married a lovely woman named Elizabeth, a teacher at the local school. The wedding was a joyous affair that brought the whole town together. Clara watched her eldest son pledge his love and felt profound gratitude that he had grown up knowing only kindness and respect in romantic relationships. He'll be a good husband, Isaac murmured beside her during the ceremony. He learned from watching us. Then we definitely did something right, Clara replied with a smile. Margaret, now 25, showed no interest in marriage, completely devoted to her medical work. She had become particularly known for her work with difficult births and women's health issues. More than one woman had come to her for help escaping abuse, and Margaret handled each case with her mother's combination of practical assistance and fierce protectiveness. James, at 16, was already managing significant responsibilities on various ranches, earning respect from men twice his age through his skill and work ethic. He talked constantly about saving money for his own place, making plans for the future with an enthusiasm that reminded Clara of herself at that age, before Marcus had crushed her dreams. "But he'll achieve his dreams," Isaac assured her when she voiced this thought. "Because he's growing up free and supported, not trapped and afraid." In 1906, Clara turned 47 and Isaac 58. They had been married 27 years, had raised 3 children who were now forging their own paths, had built a medical practice that served hundreds of people. They had survived personal demons and built something lasting and good. One warm spring evening, they took a walk out to the creek where they had spent so many afternoons during their courtship. The landscape had changed over the years, the town growing and expanding, but this spot remained peaceful and private. "You ever think about what your life would have been like if you hadn't come here?" Isaac asked as they sat by the water. Clara considered the question. "Sometimes. But not with regret. Coming here, meeting you, building this life, it all feels inevitable now. Like this is exactly where I was supposed to end up. I feel the same way." Isaac took her hand, running his thumb over her knuckles, over the silver bracelet she still wore. "You saved me as much as I saved you, you know. I was just going through motions before you arrived. You gave me purpose, passion, a reason to truly live." "We saved each other," Clara said, echoing words they had spoken many times over the years. "And we built something beautiful in the process." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the water flow past, the same as it had been doing for millennia. The sun set slowly, painting everything in golden light. Clara thought about the young woman who had arrived here nearly 3 decades earlier, broken and terrified, and carrying her shame hidden beneath long sleeves. She thought about the moment Isaac had seen her scars, the moment he had said those 3 simple words that changed everything. "You're safe now." She had been safe, not just physically, though that was part of it, but emotionally, spiritually safe. Safe to be herself, to heal at her own pace, to trust and love again. Safe to build a future without fear. "Thank you," she said softly. Isaac looked at her questioningly. "For what?" "For seeing past the scars, for being patient, for loving me even when I didn't know how to love myself." Clara squeezed his hand. "For giving me a life I never dreamed possible." Isaac pulled her close, and she nestled against him with the ease of long practice. "The pleasure has been entirely mine. You've made every day of the past 27 years worth living." As darkness fell and stars began to appear, they made their way back home. The house glowed with lamplight, and inside, Margaret was reading through medical journals while James worked on ranch accounts. Samuel and Elizabeth were coming for dinner tomorrow. Their life was full and rich and deeply satisfying. That night, as Clara lay beside Isaac in their bed, she thought about everything that had led to this moment. The pain was part of her story, yes, but so was the healing. So was the love she had found when she least expected it. So was the family she had built and the purpose she had discovered. The scars on her arms caught moonlight filtering through the window, pale lines against skin that no longer flinched from gentle touches. They were part of her, but they did not define her. She was so much more than what had been done to her. She was a survivor, a wife, a mother, a healer, a woman who had taken her broken pieces and built something whole and beautiful. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Isaac murmured, already half asleep. "Always have, always will." Clara closed her eyes, surrounded by safety and warmth, and drifted into peaceful sleep. The nightmares that had once plagued her rarely came anymore. Instead, she dreamed of tomorrow, of her children's futures, of growing old beside the man who had shown her that love could heal even the deepest wounds. The years continued to pass, bringing the changes that time always brings. In 1908, Samuel and Elizabeth welcomed their first child, making Clara and Isaac grandparents. Holding her grandson for the first time, Clara marveled at the circle of life, at how far she had come from that terrified woman on the stagecoach. "He's perfect," she whispered, touching the baby's tiny hand. "Just like his grandmother," Isaac said, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. Margaret continued her medical practice, gaining regional recognition for her work. She mentored several young women interested in medicine, paying forward the patients and teaching her father had given her. James, now 20, had saved enough to lease a small ranch. He was building it up slowly, with the same dedication and care he brought to everything. Isaac and Clara helped where they could, proud of his independence and determination. In 1910, as Clara approached her 51st birthday, she finished her manuscript about her journey from Philadelphia to Johnson City, from victim to survivor to someone who helped other survivors. Samuel had it bound properly as a gift, and she gave copies to each of her children. "This is your legacy," Samuel said after reading it. "Not just the story of survival, but the story of how you took that survival and built something meaningful from it." "You helped so many people, Mama," Margaret added. "Not just medically, but by showing them hope was possible." Even James, usually a man of few words, was moved. "You're the strongest person I know. Thank you for teaching us what real strength looks like." Isaac read it last, though he had lived most of it beside her. When he finished, he held her close and said simply, "Thank you for trusting me with your story, for letting me be part of your healing." The second decade of the new century brought continued blessings. Samuel and Elizabeth had 3 more children, filling their home with noise and laughter. Margaret finally met someone who captured her interest, a fellow doctor visiting from Houston, and their courtship was a joy to watch. James married the daughter of a neighboring rancher, a practical, kind woman named Sarah who shared his love of the land. Clara and Isaac, now well into their 50s and 60s respectively, slowed down slightly but remained active. Isaac trained younger doctors to take over most of his practice, though he still consulted on difficult cases. Clara focused her time on her grandchildren, and on continuing to help women who needed support escaping dangerous situations. "We've had a good run," Isaac said one evening as they celebrated their 35th wedding anniversary with their children and grandchildren gathered around. "Better than I ever imagined possible." "It's not over yet," Clara reminded him with a smile. "We have years left," and they did. Years of watching grandchildren grow, of celebrating marriages and births, of sitting on their porch in the evenings and reflecting on the life they had built together. Years of continued partnership and deepening love, of facing the challenges of aging with the same mutual support that had carried them through everything else. When Isaac died peacefully in his sleep in 1920 at the age of 72, Clara grieved deeply, but without the shattering despair she might have felt in earlier years. They had had 41 years together, years full of love and purpose and shared joy. She had been with him until the end, holding his hand as his breathing slowed and finally stopped. "Thank you," she whispered to his still form, "for everything, for saving me, for loving me, for giving me the most beautiful life." The funeral was attended by hundreds of people whose lives Isaac had touched, patients he had saved, doctors he had trained, families he had helped. Margaret delivered a moving eulogy about her father's dedication to healing and his unwavering kindness. But it was Clara's words that brought tears to every eye. Standing before the gathered crowd, this woman who had arrived in Johnson City 41 years earlier, broken and terrified. She spoke about the man who had shown her what love could be. "Isaac Owens saved my life in ways that had nothing to do with medicine," she said, her voice steady despite her grief. "He taught me that I was worth saving, that my past did not define my future, that love could be safe and gentle and steadfast. He gave me 41 years of partnership and joy, 3 remarkable children, and a purpose I might never have found without him. He saw my scars and didn't turn away. Instead, he offered safety, and then he offered love, and then he offered a lifetime of happiness. I will miss him every day for the rest of my life, but I will never regret a single moment we shared." Clara lived another 15 years after Isaac's death, passing away peacefully in 1935 at the age of 76. She spent those years surrounded by her children and grandchildren, continuing her work helping other women, and writing extensively about the importance of recognizing and escaping abusive relationships. Her manuscript about her own journey was eventually published after her death, becoming an important document about domestic violence and survival. It helped countless women understand that they were not alone, that escape was possible, that healing was achievable. At her funeral, Margaret read from her mother's manuscript the passage where Clara described the moment Isaac had seen her scars and said those 3 simple words that changed everything. "You're safe now," he said, and in that moment I began to believe it might be true. Not just that I was physically safe, though that mattered, but that I was safe to be myself, to heal, to hope, to love again. Those 3 words were the beginning of everything that followed. They were the first step on a journey from victim to survivor to someone who could help other survivors. They were a gift I spent the rest of my life trying to pay forward. Samuel, now a respected judge, spoke about his mother's courage and compassion. James, running a successful ranch, talked about her strength and wisdom. Her grandchildren shared memories of her kindness and the stories she told about perseverance and hope. But perhaps the most fitting tribute came from a woman who stood at the back of the crowd, a stranger to most of those present. She was young, maybe 25, with scars on her arms that she no longer hid. "I never met Clara Owens," she said when given a chance to speak. "But I read her story and it saved my life. It showed me that escape was possible, that there was hope on the other side of fear. Because of her words, I found the courage to leave my abusive husband and come west to start over, just like she did. I'm making it. I'm healing. And it's because she was brave enough to share her story and show the rest of us the way." There were dozens more like her over the years, women who read Clara's words and found hope, who saw her scars and recognized their own, who followed her example and chose survival over surrender. Clara Zimmerman Owens was buried beside Isaac in the Johnson City Cemetery under a simple headstone that read, "Beloved wife, mother, and healer. She survived, and she helped others survive. 1859–1935. But her legacy lived on in her children and grandchildren, in the women she had helped directly, and those who found hope in her written words, in the small but significant ways she had changed her corner of the world. Her story began with pain and fear, with scars hidden beneath long sleeves and shame carried like a weight. But it ended with love and purpose, and the deep satisfaction of a life fully lived. She had taken her broken pieces and built something whole and beautiful. She had proven that healing was possible, that love could be safe, that tomorrow could be better than yesterday. And it all started with 3 simple words from a patient, kind doctor who saw past her scars to the remarkable woman beneath. "You're safe now." Those words had been true. Clara had been safe, and in that safety she had flourished. She had loved and been loved. She had raised children who knew their worth. She had helped countless others find their own paths to safety and healing. Her story was one of pain transformed into purpose, of survival becoming strength, of fear giving way to hope. It was a testament to the power of patient love and the resilience of the human spirit. And in the end, it was a story with a happy ending, earned through courage and supported by unwavering devotion. Clara had found her safe place, her person, her purpose. She had lived fully and loved deeply and made a difference in the world. That was legacy enough for anyone.